Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Girl Listen, the mini podcast. I'm your host, KJ, and thank you so much for being here with me. On today's episode, we're going to talk about something that I feel like everybody may have struggled with at some point. I know for sure I did, and it's setting boundaries without feeling guilty. Now, I'm all for setting boundaries, don't get me wrong, but it's the feeling guilty part that took me a while to grow through and to honestly get over. But before we get into that, let's backtrack a little bit and talk about what boundaries are. So, boundaries are simply the limits that we set up to define what we are okay with and what we're not. Here's the thing, boundaries aren't about shutting people out. Yes, we are practicing saying no. We're not committing to any and everything. But we want to make sure that we are creating space for the things and the relationships that truly align with our values. Without those boundaries, that's how we end up drained, resentful, overwhelmed. I know for sure that's how I end up feeling those things. And so you want to make sure that you're not getting stuck in that cycle of constantly saying yes, constantly feeling drained and overwhelmed, and just doing that over and over and over again. So if you feel like you're stuck in that cycle, this episode is your permission slip to change that and to say no. Now, speaking of the word no, let's address the elephant in the room, guilt. Why is it that we feel bad for setting boundaries? Like, what makes us feel bad for saying no or not being able to commit or not having the capacity for some of these things? I know for me, a lot of it comes from fear, whether that be the fear of disappointing others, the fear of seeming selfish, or even the fear of letting people down. It was just always I don't want to be the person to say no. And as a Black woman, especially, we are often taught that we need to put everybody else first. We're here to nurture, we're here to fix, we're strong, we're independent, we can carry the load. Not only can we carry our own, we can carry others. And so we just kind of grow into that phase and that state of always saying yes and always wanting to be there to help and always wanting to be there to fix. But you cannot pour from an empty cup. And I have heard that statement so many times. And while I understood that statement always, because for me it was very literal. If the cup is empty, there's nothing to pour out of it. But it didn't relate to me in terms of myself and my energy until I got to the point where I was super burnt out and super overwhelmed. And feeling guilty doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. It just means that you're stepping out of your comfort zone and you're doing something that you normally wouldn't do. Or you're breaking a habit or you're breaking a pattern. So the guilt is natural. It's going to be a natural reaction, but it's not a stop sign. If anything, it's more of a yield. Like, hey, hold on. Maybe you need to prioritize yourself over this commitment. Maybe you need to step back. Maybe you need to say no. So embrace that guilt, listen to what it's saying, but remember that it is a sign that you are prioritizing yourself and that it's not selfish and it's necessary. It's necessary for you to say no in those times where you really feel like you need to say no. So when that guilt starts to creep in, you tell yourself, listen, no. I deserve to be at the top of my priority list. I deserve to be number one, and that's where I'm going to put me. So if you feel it, I want you to put a number one in the comments, that you are going to put yourself at the top of your priority list this week. You are going to say no if you cannot commit, and you're not going to sulk in the guilt that you may feel about it, because at the end of the day, it's okay. You're not being selfish. You're just prioritizing yourself. So where do you start when it comes to setting boundaries? I personally decided to start small. I did not want to overwhelm myself even more than I was already feeling. So I would literally just say no to something that was last minute. Or maybe even putting my phone on Do Not Disturb 30 minutes early before bedtime if I've had a long day. Those were just some simple, small boundaries that I started setting that allowed me to prioritize myself without feeling guilty at all. If it was a last minute plan or a last minute favor, I'd be like, oh, I can't. And it didn't feel bad. And like I said, those do not disturb settings on my phone, that's probably my favorite boundary, by the way. But that allowed me to really have that time to myself, to really unwind and relax for the night. And once I started seeing the benefits of just those small things, I realized, okay, no, I think I can set bigger boundaries. When it came to setting larger boundaries, though, I did find myself struggling a little bit because I would try to find a way to still commit. Like, I would start by saying, well, I don't know if I can, but let me see, which is not really a boundary because I'm still trying to please people. I'm still trying to commit, knowing that I can't. But when I started using I statements and I started expressing how I feel and just being honest and saying, I don't have the space or I don't have the time or I don't have the capacity for this right now, people are actually very understanding and a lot more understanding than I thought they would be. Another thing that I had to do was stick to my boundaries. If I said no, it had to be a no. And even though I was using those I statements and I was communicating that I could not commit, I wanted to make sure that I didn't over explain. Because at the end of the day, no is a complete sentence. It is a statement. It is an answer. Honestly, no is an no, just no. But in the instance that you do want to share why, I still tried to make sure that I did not over explain myself or talk myself into saying yes, because that was something that I found myself doing. The more I explained why I couldn't, I would try to find some time or space in my life where I could actually say yes. And that would just add to me being overwhelmed. So you want to make sure that when you are setting these boundaries, you stick to them. And I'll go back to my do not disturb settings because it's kind of funny, but honestly, all of my people know now my phone goes on do not disturb at 9:30 p.m. Anything that happens after 9:30 p.m., KJ is not going to know about it until the next morning, okay? Because I am phone off in the bed relaxing. And that is just some really good me time. I am trying to get my sleep schedule together so that I can really get some good rest, because that can be another topic for another day. But one of the big things that was in the way of that for me was my phone, because I always felt like I'm going to miss something or something exciting is going to happen or, ooh, what's going on in the group chat right now? But I have come to a place where I am okay missing out on those small moments because guess what? Those messages are still going to be there when I wake up in the morning. And if someone really needs me, if it's emergent, they can call and people can get through my do not disturb. It's fine. But I did have to set that boundary and I really had to stick to it to make sure that I was taking care of myself. Because if I can't even stick to my guns with myself, how can I truly commit to all of these other things that I'm agreeing to that involve other people? Another thing that I had to start doing was practicing some more self-compassion and understanding that the guilt was going to feel really awkward and it was probably going to try to take over. But just remembering that I was practicing setting these boundaries. And I'm setting these boundaries as a practice of self-love and self-care. And I've learned that the more that I do it, the easier it becomes. And it's really not a bad thing. It's really not. Because if someone can't respect the boundaries that you have set for yourself, then maybe that's not someone that really needs to be as close in your life as they are. Because for every boundary that I have set, whether it be personal or professional, I am extremely grateful and thankful that those boundaries are respected. Now, there's a few boundaries I have to be stern on, but for the most part, they are super respected, and it feels good to know that people respect that I'm taking care of myself. And that's really why I wanted to have this conversation and just share some of these little nuggets, because I feel like a lot of the times when we're setting boundaries, we think that people are going to have this negative idea of us and it's going to make people upset and people are going to dislike us because we say no and we don't want to do things. But that's actually not the case, or at least it hasn't been for me. And I hope that it's not the case as, everyone continues on their setting boundaries journey. So essentially, what's the takeaway from this episode? I wanted to keep it short and simple today, but I still wanted to make sure that you guys left with a message. Boundaries are not selfish. I'm going to say that one more time. Take it in, write it down, put it in the comments. Boundaries are not selfish, okay? We are setting these boundaries to protect our peace and to prioritize our well being. Because when we are our best selves, we can then give our best. And yes, there may be some people that push back, but again, that's on them. Okay? Maybe that's a person that you really did need to set a boundary for or a boundary with. And at the end of the day, their reactions to your boundaries are not your responsibility. We are only responsible for how we react to situations, not how others react. So, I'm going to give y'all a little challenge this week. And I'm going to take part in this challenge as well, so you're not going to be doing it on your own. But I want us to all think about an area in our life where we need to set a boundary. For me, I need to set healthier boundaries with social media. So that is going to be the boundary that I work on this week. Let me know what boundaries you're going to work on this week in the comments, and we'll chat, share some advice, some tips, or just talk it out with each other, because sometimes you need to do that too. But I want you to challenge yourself to find an area in your life where you need to set a boundary. It can be at work, it can be with family, it can even be with yourself, because sometimes you need to set boundaries with yourself as well. And take that first step. Just remind yourself that saying no to at least one thing is saying yes to something that is better for you. So, I have this little mantra that I came up with for this episode in particularly, and it goes like this. My needs matter just as much as anyone else's. I'm going to repeat it again. Write it down. My needs matter just as much as anyone else's. Say it in the mirror, put it in a sticky note, wrap it to yourself, whatever you need to do. But allow that mantra to stick in your mind this week as you're working on your boundary. And I can't wait to see what you guys are working on. And I wish you all success. And with that, thank you for listening to another episode of Girl Listen, the mini podcast. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share this video with anyone who you think may need it, and I will catch you on the next episode.